Okay, this Hangout on Air is live. And it can supposedly hear my voice, so that is good. I've got the speakers on, and I can see it says no 0 viewers. So hopefully, when somebody comes, if anyone comes to share, one person's trying to do this online, and hopefully she gets either gets the email or calls me. It's not quite 7 p.m. yet. Hello. Okay. So who all's here from my stat class? Brooke Regan? You're Danielle? Yep. Okay. Good. I'm gonna put this here. Well, it is 7 p.m. So are you in my stat class, or are you just working here? Okay.
Is there somewhere I can hear?
No. You can just, since you're in the room, you can just watch here. What I'm hoping is if you weren't in the room, that somebody would be showing up on Hangouts, so I'd be able to tell if they were there. But right now, it still says I've got 0 viewers. So there we go. Slideshow. Let's play this from the beginning. Okay. And so this is not escape. Let's see from the beginning. This is weird. It's not. Oh, there it is. There it is. I get a different console here. Okay, so welcome to our first synchronous session. Okay, so there's 3 things I mentioned in this that I want to be able to do. One is to basically know how to guarantee yourself a passing grade regardless of what your final average in the class is. There's some signs that maybe people don't know that. It's not that I want people to do terrible. It's that I want people to do these things that I'm going to suggest, and if they do them, you at least get a C. Could be bigger. I bet bigger for a lot of people. Second thing is this idea is understanding what the big picture of this course is. Daniel and I had a little conversation in my office about that, but that's part of it. And finally, I'm going to talk about some types of things that you missed on the test. And there's basically 2 areas that a lot of people missed.
Well, I have a question.
Yes.
I printed off my test.
Okay.
So, when you were talking about parameter, right?
Yes.
I remember you said that. But I looked up it in the book, and it says the average mean or something like that in the book that's on there.
No, it'll talk about there's a lot of different things that are parameters. A mean of a population can be a parameter. The standard deviation of a population can be a parameter. The proportion of people who, say, favor Barack Obama in a population can be a parameter. Lots of different things can be a parameter, but a parameter is going to be something that describes a population. Since I can't see you and since we will go over that, let's kind of move on kind of in order. Okay? We will go over that. That's definitely one of the 2 areas that a lot of people struggled with. Okay? So, here's the slide. It says, don't let a low average get in the way of passing stats. So from the syllabus, students who get an average below 80% will receive a C, D, or F grade as follows. So we don't have just the 70% cutoff anymore. So One way to get a C is simply average 75% or greater. Okay, fair enough. Second way to get a C is to complete all your, do all the following. So all the following includes one. You basically do your homework, and you get most of it in on time. Have I counted exactly to make sure it's exactly 90%? No. But what I have done is what it will happen is I don't want people dumping a bunch of crap on me on the last day of school because, well, you told me I'd get a C. So it's basically, you got to be basically making an effort to get it in on time. Second item you have to do in this set of all four of the following, or all five of the following. Score 100% on your quizzes. Sometimes the quizzes are hard, but you can retake them. And I think both of you have retaken quizzes before, the ones that are in here. Okay? I'm going to escape for a minute and see if anybody has joined us on Hangouts. Still lists as 0 viewers. Hopefully nobody is wondering where the heck we are. Okay? Get your quizzes, repeat them till you get 100%. Third, when we have a discussion board, participate. So we've had one so far. In roughly a week and a half, 2 weeks, there will be another. I think it's actually just after our next exam. So next exam's on the 6th. It'll cover through Unit H. And this next discussion board, or series of discussion boards, is a series of experiments I want you guys to do, and so we can talk about the concept that comes up in the next section. So 4, you take all your tests, okay? And 5, you have no incidents of cheating or plagiarism. So none of that is, you can get a C. It doesn't set a floor for what average gets you a C, but it does set a floor for those are things you need to do. Those 4 things. And so if I'm seeing the occasional quiz not up to 100% and then just left there, no, you want to go back and redo them. On the assignments, I've said completed, but implicit in that is that you check them. Okay? So that idea of when you are done with an assignment, let me just kind of minimize this and go to, let's just go to E as probability topics, okay? So there's a few problems, but what I'm saying is in reading E, you scroll to the very end and then creep back up, and about not far away from the very end is solutions to, those are exercises, practices. So I keep going down. Review. See, review. Homework. So back on page 162 are solutions to the homework. So when you've done, you look up the problems you were assigned and compare your answers to the ones that are there to see if you've done them correctly. If you haven't done them correctly, you might want to check with me, check with your book, check yourself. Okay? So there's what's coming up in terms of homework, and that's also an expectation is, of course, that you're not just turning in whatever to me, that you're actually trying to figure out whether you've got it right. Okay? So, final item is don't cheat. Okay? And so I just repeat this in the next slide. Your passing strategy. You want to at least do the following. Do all of your homework, do most of it on time, and don't forget to check the answers at the end of the reading. Repeat your quizzes until you get 100%. When a discussion board comes up, participate in it. Don't miss a test. Don't cheat. And what I'm hoping is this is all to help you learn the material well enough to perhaps even earn an average worthy of a higher grade. Okay? All right, so that's how to get a higher grade or a C, at least a minimum of a C, and I think most people like better than that, but to at least not stress about, oh my goodness, I'm going to pass, okay? Okay, and this guy, Of course, this is a person who's impossible to get a hold of, who's going to call me right during when I'm in class. Bummer. Oh well. So, the big picture is the next thing, and I think that's what made those problems that you missed kind of hard on people, is because they didn't get the picture, the big picture. Okay, so where the big picture comes from is right here. Let's go to view the current slide. If I click on that, it should take me, yes it does, to CNN. And hopefully it doesn't take too long for CNN to decide to come about. Okay, so it's about the Senate race in Iowa. Okay, and why the Senate's important is because it's apparently very close as to who has control of the Senate, the Democrats or the Republicans. And this is apparently a swing district. Now that part of it, of why it's important, is no big deal to me. What's a big deal to me is we get to the end of this, and it says the CNN ORC poll was conducted September 8th through 10th with 1,013 adults questioned by CNN and ORC. Okay? So here is the deal. There's 1,013 adults in Iowa. But there's 3 million people, or the 1,013 adults in our survey, but there's over 3 million people living there. Now think of what a small fraction that is of a population. Divide 1,013 by 3 million, express it as a percentage, you're talking about not even about 1%, not even about 1/10 of 1%. You're talking about 3/100ths of 1% of this population. Hardly anybody. And yet this poll makes news. And it makes news in spite of the fact that it's not just because CNN commissioned it. That's part of it. They commissioned it to make news, and there's a reason behind it. They selected folks according to a random method, one of those good methods we described earlier. Okay, and it was most likely a combination of what's called stratified sampling and cluster sampling. Now, because of this, we believe they're actually representative of the views of adult Iowans. Now what that means, representative, we had to unpack that a little bit. We could have gotten extremely unlucky and had a group of 1,013 adults that were nothing like Iowa. That's possible according to chance. The chances of that happening are slim to none. So what's more likely is when you pick a good sample according to a random sampling method, the odds are what they think is going to be close to what that larger group of people, places, or things thinks as well, or what that looks like. What that little group of people, places, or things is going to look like is pretty close to what a much larger group of people, places, or things look like. And so we were able to infer this study that the race is close among all Iowans, not just this group of people the size of Beach, North Dakota, not just this little group of 1,000 people. So what we are trying to do, in terms of a picture of the big picture, is you've got a ginormous group of people, places, or things represented by this circle. What do we call the large group of people, places, or things that we're actually interested in? What's that large group of people, places, or things that we are actually interested in called? Population, sure. And if I write the word population out, this pen's tendency to delay will drive me baloney. Okay, so meanwhile, because it's huge, because in this case it's 3 million Iowans, right? We can't call them all. By the time we call them, by the time we get them all, they've changed their minds. So it's silly to call everybody. But we can call a small subset. And if we pick that small subset at random in a way that gets us a truly representative sample, by the way, that word sample, I just gave away what that group is called without asking, without telling you, without asking. It's the sample, it's that small group. That's the group we actually get to look at. Now, by themselves, they're not very important. By themselves, they're just a few dozen, a few hundred, in this case, 1,000 people. By themselves, they're not that important. It's because the way we pick them, we think they represent that much larger group. We think they tell us something about that much larger group. That's what makes the sample even worth knowing. Okay? So now there's things we might want to know about this large population. In this case, maybe what percentage is planning to vote for the Democrat. I'll give that variable the name the letter P. And here we want to know what percentage maybe of the sample plans to vote Democrat, because if we know that percentage of the sample, we have a good guess, a good estimate of what that percentage is in the population. So let's say 49% of this sample wants the Democrat, which is what happened. That leads us to believe that roughly 49% of the population, all Iowans, want the Democrat. Could it be different? Yeah, it could be different. Probably is a little different. Probably is off. I mean, the chance of getting a sample that exactly like all Iowans is, again, kind of slim to none. But we do expect that proportion to hang pretty close to what the population proportion that we're actually interested in. So the good news about the sample parameter, or the sample statistics, p-hat, the thing you can calculate that talks about a sample, is called a statistic. Okay? And we use it to estimate something we want to know, namely a parameter. Now, I'm not saying that p-hat is the only statistic out there and that p is the only parameter out there. I'm saying that parameters are numbers that describe a population. Statistics are numbers that describe a sample. Let's go back to the slideshow. Okay? So, there is a large group of people, places, or things we care about. What have we been calling that large group of people, places, or things we care about in the virtual class? What have we been calling it? Say it, go ahead. Population. I saw that P coming out and it goes, yeah, you do know it. It's a population. Okay? But if we care about them, why don't we ask them directly? Why can't we just go to our population and ask them directly and skip this middleman of taking a sample? Why do we bother going to a sample instead of a population? Usually it's smaller. It's a lot more manageable because it's a lot smaller. And it's a lot more stable, too. I mean, once you've decided who your population is, they're just there and you're done with it. Okay? So, next thing, there's this piece of information we want to know about that population. Maybe it's what percentage of them plan to vote Democratic. Maybe it's How many hours a week do they spend watching TV news on average? Maybe it's, is there some sort of relationship between how they lean politically and how many hours of TV an individual watches for this population? When we ask these questions and get these answers about a population, what are those numbers called? The ones that go with the population P are the what? Things like the proportion of all Iowans who vote Democratic. Well, they are ratios in this case, but you know, the average isn't necessarily a ratio. It's the average number of people who... There was another word with the P that we just... It's a parameter. The number that describes the population is a parameter. If it describes a population, it's a parameter. And what about a number that describes, a sample? We can't look at the whole population. We can look at the sample and do the things to it that we'd like to do to the population because they're a more manageable size. Okay, so that strategically chosen subset of the population, by the way, is called a what? Well, that's the number that describes that group. What's the group itself called? What's that subset itself called? The people. They are a what of the population? A sample of the population. They are a sample of the population. Now, we named some sampling methods, a bunch of them. And I don't want you getting too hung up on them, but I wanted you to look at them. And people didn't do great on this part. They did not bad. But can you think of a sampling method that was relatively good, that maybe a scientific survey like this might use? Think of those names of sampling methods. Can you think of one that someone might use here? Let's check and see. Stratified, yeah, stratified sample is one of the good ones. It's where you actually break up the population into small groups, or relatively small strata, smaller, that is, parts of it. So say break up a big old university into its freshmen, sophomores, juniors, seniors, and grad students. And then you randomly sample each of those groups. Okay? That's a stratified sample. That's one of the good ones. There's other sampling methods that you'll see maybe more commonly, and they're not utterly worthless, but really it'd be a shame if a big news organization used this sampling method and reported it to you. And there's a couple. You mentioned one of the names of ones that's not as good. Systematic sample is one of the ones that probably wouldn't be as good. Systematic sample is like we stand outside the Centra on the night of a ball game. We count the first 4 people that walk by, ignore them. The 5th, we talk to them. 6th, 7th, and 8th person, 9th person walks by, we ignore them. The 10th, we talk to them. Every 5th person, or every 3rd person, or every 10th person, we talk to. That's a systematic sample. And it looks like you're better than the one that's kind of the low level, the low watermark. What's even worse than a systematic sample, usually? Oh, cluster's one of the better ones. It's a different kind, but it's one of the ones that it takes some work. There's one that's used just because it's easy, not because it's necessarily good.
Non-random.
It's non-random, and there's a name for it. Because systematic isn't random either, by the way. It's used because it's convenient. A convenience sample. That's the one where you just talk to the people in your class. You talk to the people at your church. Whatever's convenient, easy to get, you talk to them. They may happen to be quite representative, but you really can't verify it. Not quite like you can things like the cluster sample and the stratified sample. By the way, the type of sampling we'll talk about most is one called simple random sampling. And simple random sampling is the one that's like putting a bunch of names into a hat and drawing out names. That's simple random sampling. There's a more complicated mathematical version of describing that. But in the end, what you need to know is that's the one that's like taking everybody's name, putting it into a hat or putting it into a lottery ball, and drawing the names out with every group of people having an equal chance of being selected. Okay, that's a simple random sample. The mathematics behind it, excuse me for a moment, the mathematics behind it are relatively easy, but the other stuff isn't as much, not as much. Okay? But that's the one we tend to use, even though it's almost impossible to get. But we use it because the mathematics are easy and it gives us a good idea. We can explore some concepts by talking about, well, assume things are sampled according to a simple random sample. Okay? Okay. So then there's this interesting piece of information. So the subset itself was called a sample. What's that piece of information that we're actually interested in based on a sample called? Or the one that we can get that maybe tells us what a parameter is. What's that number that describes the sample? I've heard the word earlier. That's the one that's a statistic. So the two S's go together, two P's go together. A statistic describes a sample. A parameter describes a population. Statistic describes a sample. A parameter describes a population. We use the statistic because it's easy to get. We see, what's approximately going on in the population is what we see in the sample. So 49% of our surveyed people want a Democrat. Therefore, it leads us to believe that roughly 49% of all people in Iowa want a Democrat. So when you've got a race that's 49 to 48, what they'll sometimes call that is a statistical dead heat. Because while within the little group of 1,000 people, 49% beats 48%. Within that little group, there's enough variation that between the sample and the population that the population might be something a little different. But they're really close. That's what you know, is that the two candidates are really close in that state. Okay? All right. Now here I said take out your cell phones, but we have a grand total of 2 people here, and nobody online. That makes me sad because I have the feeling it's because people aren't being able to get a hold of online, which sometimes, something went whack nuts. Okay, but hopefully we'll get it fixed. And so anyway, but there's some questions here, and what I'll ask you to do is rather than use the cell phones, let me just see, I'll just show you have you show me some fingers here. I'll show you what I mean by this when we see the polls themselves. No, it's... Okay. Pardon me? So you don't need to show the phone. Don't bother. If we had a larger group, I would have conducted this poll using the cell phones. Okay? So let's take a look at this question here. There's a set of 4 questions I want to look at here about this. And then we'll answer some other questions which you didn't just review and use that set of questions as a review. Okay. So now there's these numbers to dial, but we won't be dialing numbers since there's only 2 of us here. Okay? but I want, for the sake of, I think this is being recorded, and so I want to kind of talk about it, in terms of it's being recorded. So we've got a Pew Research Center poll. 73% of 3,011 adults surveyed said they used the internet. Now, do they care about these 3,011 directly? No. They probably care more about a larger set of all American adults. What is that set called? Raise one finger for population, 2 fingers for parameter, 3 for sample, 4 for statistic. What's that large group of Americans called? Okay, just hang up. So I've got 1 vote. Well, just 1 finger for population, 2 for, okay. So I've got 2 sets of 1 finger, and even better yet, neither of them were the middle finger, which is kind of nice. It is, in fact, the population. Okay? And so let's go to the next item. Okay, we'll go back to this. Question. You sure? Okay. Let's go to the next question. Okay. Now, we're back to another Pew Research, the same Pew Research Center poll. Ooh, this is not showing, but I hope it's showing. I do not know why this is refusing to show this poll. So you have to listen to us again, unfortunately. You have to get just the verbal. Okay? I am curious what's being shared on the camera. Oh, the camera's getting it for some reason, but just we're not seeing it here. Anyway, in a Pew Research Center poll, 73% of 3,011 adults surveyed said they use the internet. That set of 3,011 adults, that set of 3,011 adults is called 1 finger for parameter, 2 fingers for population, 3 for sample, 4 for statistic. That's 1 parameter, 2 population, 3 sample, 4 statistic. What is that group? Okay, let's shoot. Could you please come up here and look at the screen? I'm sorry. I don't know why that's not projecting. It's right on my screen. It should be projecting exactly what I'm seeing, but it's not. So, in that group, raise 1 finger for parameter, 2 for population, 3 for sample, 4 for statistic. So I see 1 person says sample, 1 person says statistic. So you're right on that it's one of the S's. You're right on that it's one of the S's. Oh, good. We are talking about the group, the set. There you go. It's the sample. Good. Next question. It's thinking, and I do not know why it's not showing it on the projector. I want to reset, turn off the projector for a second and see if when I turn it back on, it resets and shows what's actually on the screen. Okay? But meanwhile, while it's thinking and trying to warm back up again, we've got the Pew Research Center poll. 73% of the 3,011 surveyed said they use the internet. The proportion of American adults who use the internet is called what? In other words, we're now looking for, hey, what fraction or what percent of American adults use the internet? That's the question. And its answer is known as 1 finger for parameter, 2 for population, 3 for sample, 4 for statistic. What is that number you hold up for that fraction percentage of American adults? That number that answers the question, hey, what fraction of American adults use the internet? That is the parameter. Good. And finally, in this group, and then we'll go to some others. Okay. Same survey.
So is proportion a key word? Because that's the problem I have is reading the question when it says, when it's asking certain things. How do I know when it's asking for the number or the group? Proportion is a key word when it's asking.
It's a keyword. It's one of them. Okay? A proportion means, hey, what fraction of Americans figured this out? But that's not the only parameter out there. What's the average? What's the average number of hours they spend on the internet? That could be a parameter. It's a population average. Okay? What's the standard deviation of all these people about their number of hours on the internet? All those numbers, it's something that's ultimately a number. Whereas if it's just people, the group of people, the set of people, those are keywords for it. It's going to be a population or sample. It's talking about a group of people, places, or things. If it's talking about a number, like what proportion of them support the Democrats, what is their average salary, then it's a parameter or statistic. Does that make sense?
Proportion in here, so
it's one of the options. It's one of the options.
Either a number or
No, a proportion is a number.
Proportion is a number.
Yes, it's the proportion of American adults who use the internet is a number. It is a parameter. A proportion. A proportion is not the word portion. They're related words, but they're not the same thing. If you're talking about a portion, then maybe you might talk a bit about a group. A proportion is a number. It's a fraction.
Average standard deviation.
Those are, and therefore they could also be parameters and statistics as well. Group isn't a number. Group is talking about a group of people. A group of people, whether it be the large group of all Americans that we're interested in, or the small group of 3,011 Americans we actually talked to. Groups of people, groups of places, groups of things are going to be either populations or samples. The large group we're interested in is a population. The small group we actually get to look at is a sample. Numbers that describe that large group. Numbers like the percentage of all Americans who plan to vote Democrat. The average number of time, the average amount of time Iowans spend watching TV. Those are numbers that describe large groups of people, places, or things. They are parameters. Whereas the ones that describe sets that are small enough for us to look at, describe samples, are called statistics. What fraction of these 3,011 adults who surveyed, what fraction of them use the internet? Yeah, it's a number word. It's talking again about a statistic. The proportion, a fraction is a synonym for a proportion. What proportion of these adults, of these 3,011 adults, what proportion of them use the internet? What is the average TV watching time per week for these 3,011 adults? That's a statistic. It describes a sample. Statistics describe samples. Parameters describe populations. I could have sworn I had another group.
Oh, shoot.
Okay. Well, I'm going to have to make up questions since you can't see them anyway. Unfortunately, people in the room can't see them anyway. So first of all, we have a set of graphs here. And let's just write up the 4 possibilities of graphs that we might want to look at. Is it going to go? No, that's not the best one. How about here? Well, let me go to Paint and show you. No, it's not doing squat here. I got to tell them about this here. Okay. Well, let me see. If, again, nobody is still online. No viewers. Let's. Pardon me? Yes, or we could do is no. I can write these we write these words on the board. And find the doggone. Yeah, come up and look at it. I can't find even the pens to use in this room. Okay. Definitely deal with that tomorrow morning, okay? So, 4 types of graphs. One is a histogram. One option is going to be parallel box plots. So you know what a box plot is. The idea of parallel box plots is putting 2 box plots next to each other to allow for comparisons. The third type of graph that I'm interested here is a scatter diagram or scatter plot. And the fourth is a pie chart. And they're all nice charts in their place. But which one you use depends on what type of data you have. So if I wanted to describe the distribution of ages of students at Miles Community College, first of all, the variable in this case is age. It's that response that varies from student to student. And it's the thing we're recording, and the thing we want to kind of display is responses to the setup here. Now, which one of these 4 graphs would describe the distribution of ages? As if we had this list of how old everybody at Miles Community College was, and we wanted to put it into a chart, which one of those 4, there's really only one of them that's right for that task. Okay. Things. What pieces
of
of
histogram would be easier if you had a age range, you know, like.
It makes more sense, yes, because a histogram is about one variable. And what's the name of that? Is it qualitative or quantitative?
What? It's one variable.
The variable we just described, ages. It's definitely quantitative. So when you've got one quantitative variable, it makes more sense to use a histogram. Now, let's change it up. We have another variable. We want to ask a question for each student at MCC. Are you male or female? That's just the next question. Every student gets asked male or female. Okay? And we want to know what fraction are males, what fraction are females. What chart of these 4 options would best describe that? What say you, Daniel?
Yes or no?
Bunch of yeses and nos, and you want to kind of describe what fraction said yes, what fraction said no. Definitely a pie chart. So you got one variable, it's qualitative. So that's what a pie chart is about. One variable, and it's qualitative. Whereas a histogram is one variable, and it's quantitative. Now, third question. We've got a group of students at MCC. And now we want to know the relationship between 2 pieces of information. One piece of information you could ask them is, how old are you? Hold on, we got to get the other piece of information. Because it's one of these 2. But which piece of information you ask depends on what this, okay. So the one is, how old are you? Age. The other is height. Is there some sort of relationship between age and height? Now, what type of variable is age?
Quantitative.
Sure, it's a how much, how many, it's quantitative. They're both quantitative. So, when you have a scatter plot, you've got this idea of, you've got one quantitative variable plotted on the y-axis, the other plotted on the x. So, a person who's 5'10" and 19 years old might go here. A person who is 6'1" and 18 years old might go here. A person who is 6 feet tall and 22 years old might go here, and so on. But each point in the scatter plot is an ordered pair, with one piece of information being the age, the other piece of information being their height. And so you plot it out across, and it has to be a scatter plot is the one that is used for that type of data. Now, that's leaving parallel box plots. What are parallel box plots about? Well, you've got maybe 2 groups of people, male and female, say, or maybe 3 groups, male, female, and other, freshmen, sophomore, junior, seniors. But you've got grouping going on. You've got one qualitative variable across this bottom. And for every single one of those groups, you have a description of that group on one quantitative variable. How old are the men here? How old are the women here? Where is this pen gone? Oh, it's because I'm using the wrong end. Here, maybe. Yeah. Okay. How old are the women? And the men and the women have a box plot plotted right next to each other with a common axis to compare them to. So it looks like the males and the females have roughly the same heights at each of these different quantiles. Okay? And so they're roughly the same there. But if one box was a lot higher than the other, you'd say, gosh, the females might be a lot older than the males. So when you've got the relationship between a quantitative variable like age and a qualitative variable like gender, that type of relationship is what's found by parallel box plot. Yeah. Either qualitative versus quantitative, or another way of thinking about the same exact situation, you've got this one quantitative variable and you want to compare it across groups. Right? The ages of men versus the ages of women. Both are saying different ways of saying basically the same thing. Do you guys think you could do better if you were to take a quiz early next week on some of these options?
Should I retake the test?
Probably not retake the test, but probably
Most of these,
Yeah, there's probably going to be some sort
I
of.
swear I knew like a lot of these.
Yeah.
But I just didn't put 'em
What's
in.
probably going to happen is it's going to be probably some sort of extra credit assignment with generous extra credit on that test. So you can get maybe about 10 or 15 points added to your test score by doing well. I'm not sure exactly how it's going to go, but I'm thinking of something to do to give people an incentive to go back over the test, look at the things they learned, and then study them. See, there were several people up in the 80s too, and that's the thing. So really,
So if we did the quiz, it could get us more points on the test we just took.
yeah, I'm thinking of
A
some
little
sort of.
bit.
It's not made up yet, but I'm thinking early next week I will give you guys an opportunity to do that. Does you think it would make more sense now if you did that?
To do this? Yeah, I can
Yeah.
do the test.
Yeah. So we'll find out next week what's the best way to do that, and I haven't decided yet. But there will be a chance to bump up the
I
average
think
a
my
bit
main
too.
thing was here, I just wasn't reading things right here, or the proportion thing. I
You
mean,
did
the
the
different.
question that was like one.
Yeah.
That one got me.
So I think we're going to have another one of.
Two different words. Same one. Sorry.
No, that's okay. I kind of interrupted you, I think, but it's I think we're going to have another one of these, probably more close to before the next exam. We'll have another set of 2 or 3 days where people can come and make that maybe before the next exam, with that idea of trying to think in terms of how our questions phrased and being able to read them well. That does sometimes happen, is that you don't quite. You sort of know it, but you just don't quite read the question correctly, and some of them get verbose. Okay, so wrapping up the 3 things is you've got in your syllabus a list of items that you can do to at least make sure you're passing. Hopefully they're things that will help you more than just pass, maybe get a B or an A. But they're things that will help you.
So
And they're
basically from our grades right now, you're saying none of us can get an A?
No, I'm not saying that at all.
Because I don't even know.
I'm not necessarily saying I don't have your grade in front of me. What I'm saying is, I'm seeing a lot of people just take a quiz once, get whatever they get, and leave it, or miss an assignment and never go back and try to finish it. That's what I'm seeing. I'm saying that's not the way if you're struggling to do it. You want to make sure that's done first, and then that should help you do better on the tests and help you get a better grade.
Well, the homework part really frustrates me. Yeah, you have the answers in the back, but I'm more concerned about how you get the answer. in the back.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, and that's
And
not.
like throughout your book, when it's like even telling you how to do it, like it's not really showing you how to do it. Is how I feel.
And so then maybe that's the time to look and say, okay, I've done my homework. This is what I'm getting. Maybe we need to talk more. That's your cue to let me know, as opposed to being frustrated now. Which I understand people are frustrated now. I don't want it, but it's or if you're frustrated now. But I'm just saying, we're looking to learn it, and that's so you want to do just be careful to keep the eye on what do I do next. Okay, so if this assignment's not working out, or if I've got an assignment that's got a bunch of answers and my answers are different, so the idea isn't go in there obviously and look up the answers, write them down, and hand them in. The idea is to do the homework, then check the answers, and hope that, and usually this is the case, if what you got happens to be the same as what's in the answers in the text, chances are is because you did the right thing, you knew what you were doing. Whereas if what you got is
when
different,
I did the stuff on the test, like there was some things that I'm pretty sure that I did through, and I was like where I calculated in here, but for some reason I got the answer, and I swear, the mean and the median were equal, but in my calculator that's what it said, but for some reason the mean was larger than the median, and I don't get it. I calculated, it came out to be, what was one of the answers on the test, and I was like,
So I must be doing something.
Yeah. Let's talk about, as soon as the program's over, I'll kill the program. We can look over your test specifically and see what happened on your test specifically.
Is there any way I could do that Friday?
You can,
Since
yeah.
I have something due before midnight.
That's
and
fine.
I
That's
thought
no,
the
that's
first
fine. That's
night-
fine. Yeah, I'm sensing.
I'm sweat.
Yeah, go do that and come back and just It's okay. I'm not. Brooke's had me for a class before. She knows this. I don't know if you've had me. Maybe have you had me for a class before?
This is my first semester
At Mouse City. I'm really not out to mess with people. That's not my goal here. My goal here is to help people learn. If you're not learning, then we have to fix that. But the point is, it isn't to mess with people. And I'm getting a vibe that seems to say, well, how am I trying to mess with you? Sort of almost. It's almost an anger or something. It's just, no, I'm really not.
No, I'm just frustrated
Yeah.
with my own life.
And I understand
I'm
frustration.
not frustrated like with the way this is going. I'm more frustrated about my grade, how I feel like I actually put quite a bit of time into it, and how it came out like this, and I'm thinking I'm overstressed, and that's the reason why I'm not doing good in any of my classes.
Well, let's see. We can figure this one out. We really, I think, can.
There's always office hours too.
And there's office hours, and we visited this afternoon too. But just we can figure this out, okay? And that's so kind of put the spin mentally. It's kind of hard right now, but put the spin mentally on, okay, what has to change, what needs to go right because I'm working, as opposed to. And that's kind of hard because right now the place it's not going well and I'm frustrated and I put in a lot of work to, okay, let's talk about how the work has gone and see what needs to change. Because I would not be surprised if things in the class as it is need to change. This is only the second time I've taught it online. So there is not the least bit
So,
surprise
on
in my
Friday,
part.
After 3, you'd be around this area.
I can be here in this area. Take down my number, please, because I may be in and out, or I may not be right in my office. And so take down my number, please. And meanwhile, I'm going
I know
to.
it's somewhere online, but.
Oh, but see, not the cell phone. The cell phone isn't necessarily online. I want
I
to.
thought it was.
Not the. Maybe it's in the class website. But let's stop the broadcast.